I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. You know how you get these ideas in your head of what you want to learn more about and what you want your life to look like and things you want to improve. And you just kind of start bringing more of that into your life. And then suddenly people just start to show up who are kind of aligned with what you're putting out into the world. And it makes you feel a little less alone. I should be just looking in the mirror and saying this because that is what's going on with me. And that is what this episode is all about. I have been being a little bit more, transparent, I guess you could say, on social media and here on the podcast, talking about things that I don't typically share publicly. And that has actually been a really good thing because I've started to align myself with people who are kind of doing the same thing. And what I have found is it helps me feel a little more comfortable and confident in continuing to do that. And I feel totally aligned with what I'm talking about. And if you're listening to this and you're like, what the heck is she talking about? Hold on, because I'm going to get to it. The person that I interviewed on this episode, we did a podcast collaboration, so she's going to be publishing this on her podcast as well. But she reached out to me on Instagram. And if you're on social media, you may, like me, get messages from people and you're like, I don't know who you are, leave me alone. You're just trying to sell me something, all that kind of stuff. But she left me a message and I just felt like she was my people and somebody that I wanted to talk to a little bit more. And so we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit over the past couple of months. And we recorded this episode and it was one of those moments where you just feel like it's the right person at the right time. And that's kind of how this episode came about. We hit record without really having a clear direction of where we were going to go and what we're going to talk about, just to kind of like follow our intuition and talk about what ended up coming up with the overarching theme of what we're discussing, which is how to feel more confident and how to trust your intuition and things like that. And I'll tell you all about her in just a moment, but I wanted to let you know that I'm a little more vulnerable in this episode. I talk about a few things that I haven't really talked about publicly very much. The people in my personal life are aware of these things, but I haven't really shared them a lot. And it felt really good to kind of talk about it with somebody who likes to get kind of weird too. And so all of this to say that this guest I have on, her name is Kristi Simons, and she is a coach for teenagers and young women. And she and I both have similar stories. We both come from a background in education and then felt called to do something a little bit different and to evolve our gifts and evolve our offerings to make the world a better place in different ways. And so she reached out and I was an immediate yes. Yes. So in this conversation, we are talking about ways to build self-confidence, to overcome self-doubt, and to cultivate inner peace. One thing I know for sure is if you're able to do that, you are going to be a better person, a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, a better daughter, sister, all of the things. And so hard to do sometimes, right? Let's be real. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We share some of our personal stories of self-discovery, and we're also going to give you some strategies to help you feel more confident in your own life. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Kristi Simons. She is an empowerment and confidence coach for teens. Her mission is to empower and inspire her clients to live a life that is authentic, fulfilling, and aligned with their values. She believes that everyone has the potential to create positive change in their lives and is inspired to support clients on their journey toward personal growth and transformation. And I also have some really amazing news as this episode comes out. In just under a week, Kristi and I are going to be hosting a workshop totally free on Tuesday, February 4th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And this workshop is called Finding Your Inner Compass. Discover your unique gifts and navigate your true path. And in this workshop, you're going to learn how to reconnect with your inner wisdom, overcome the blocks that are holding you back, and create space for more joy and fulfillment. And you're going to walk away with some really practical tools too. How to trust your intuition, set aligned boundaries, and design a personalized path to the life you have been craving. And you'll also leave with a 3-step action plan to keep the momentum going. Like I said, it's totally free, and the link to sign up is in the description below. And if you've been feeling overwhelmed, I know many of you have been feeling overwhelmed, like there's a lot going on in the world, in your life, energetically, you're in good company. And just know that you are capable of more. And if you haven't been sure how to step forward, this workshop is for you. Go ahead and sign up now. And I really look forward to seeing you there. So without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Kristi Simons. I'm so excited about this conversation with you, Kristi. Your audience is going to get to know me, and I'm going to get to know you. And before we dive into what we're going to talk about, I wanted to just both of us give each other a chance to introduce ourselves and talk about our background and who we are and who we help. And then we're going to get into today's conversation. So, Kristi, tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
I love this question. Thank you, Jennifer, first of all, for just, sharing time and space with me. I love having meaningful conversations. It's the reason that I started my podcast, Confident Teen, a little over 3 years ago now. And I did that because there was a really big part of me, my teen self, that was searching for a lot back when she was younger, and she wasn't able to find it. And so I feel like throughout my life, I've always been the type of person that would check all the boxes, get everything done. And from an external perspective, I feel like everything looked like it was always really, really put together. But on the inside, I felt like something was so disconnected. So to fast forward in 2020, when I became a mom for the first time, that disconnection really just um everything started to separate. Like I really felt like a shattering, and all of those pieces were just starting to fall away. And what happened when I had my son in 2020 was that something came to the surface, and what that was is, that something needed to change, and I knew that that something was me. I struggled with addiction before having my children. And that really also leads back to my teen years and just wanting to fit in, wanting to people please, and never wanting to feel like I was the outcast or like I was somebody who was different. I wanted to fit in, I wanted to belong. But what I didn't recognize back then was belonging is really, it comes back to this place within yourself that feels like home, that connection to yourself. And so I really needed over the last 4 years, well, 5 years, we're now in 2025,
Yeah.
but I've really been piecing all of those parts back together. And a big part of my journey really started when I hired my own coach. Her name is Heather Chauvin. So I joined my own coaching community and I learned so much. And one of the biggest things that came through for me was this language of self love, confidence, and empowerment that I felt like I was not aware of. I was definitely more aware of this voice of self criticism, of comparison, of judgment, as I said. And I was always just so hard on myself. And I was really trying to find my place and find my way back home to the girl that I always knew I was capable of being, but I just didn't have any guidance or direction back then. And so, through the whole process of my own personal development journey, I ended up leaving my full time teaching career. I was a teacher for just over a decade. And once all of this new information came into my field, I just knew that, this wasn't something that was being taught in the traditional school system, not to this degree. And I knew that this is information that everybody needs to learn. Like it is so important. It felt like this navigational system, our emotions and our energy, and just tying it all back together. So I stepped away from the classroom to coach teens full time. And that in itself was a whole process and a big transition, but it led me to where I am today. And I am now a soul coach and psychic medium for teens, and I'm loving it. I love the work that I do, and that's just a little bit of a snapshot
Yeah.
of me to get us
Yeah.
started.
I love your story and I resonate with it so much. And I think that's why it's great that we're having this conversation. You and I have a lot in common. It's like we've been walking similar paths, and here we are kind of converging and discussing the journeys we've been on. And just like you, I'll take a moment to just explain who I am. I am also a coach, but my background is very similar. I also was in the field of education for a long time, about 14 years. And then there was this moment in my life, kind of like what you were explaining, where I realized that there was something else, or I had an internal calling, that there's something more out there for me, that I have more to add to the world in a different way outside of the classroom. And so that's when I went and got my coach certification. And same thing with you, 2020. It was like everything came crashing down. And for me, it was my teenage daughter's mental health really crisis there. She has severe OCD. And at the time, we were learning all of that. And we were in and out of residential facilities and hospitals. And throughout all of that, I was alongside her figuring out who I am and also recognizing the need for support for teens and parents that is just really lacking. And I wanted to be a part of the solution. So to help teenagers feel more confident, but also parents learn how to raise confident teenagers, to raise independent teenagers. So I myself have two teenagers myself. I just said myself twice. So I have two teens, and of course I was a teen as well. You and I are very similar in the people-pleasing tendencies and the everything looks great on the outside, the need to fit in and to look like I have everything all together. And that, in essence, is part of my major suffering from anxiety, that it's just not all going to be perfect and as much as I want it to be. And so, yeah, long story short, I started to heal myself. And then I wanted to turn around and be able to help other people heal, whether
Yeah.
it's teens, parents, and to help uplift humanity. I mean, just in short,
Yeah.
uplift the world. And I know that you and I are on the same page with that. And so that's why I'm so glad that we're coming together on this conversation.
I know. My energy is like, I feel like I'm vibrating right now. I'm so excited. I have
Yes,
to tell you too, Jen, I can I call you Jen?
of course.
Okay. So I have actually so did you start this podcast, your podcast Raising Happy Teens in 2020?
I started it in 2022, actually, but I started coaching teens in 2020.
Okay, because you came into my world when I finally decided to start my own podcast. So I already knew about you. I was following your podcast and I was listening to it. So it's just so interesting, as you say, like, we've kind of been walking side by side with each other.
Mhm.
We actually have been, and you probably didn't know that either, right? That,
Yeah.
in the background, you don't always know who's listening and who's showing up
Mhm.
to listen to the conversations that you're putting out there. But I was one of them. So I just think it's so cool today that it led us to having this conversation. And
Me
again, it's just,
too.
yeah, it's how it's just the little breadcrumbs. Like I'm always just, trying to connect those dots. And often in terms of perfectionism, something that I've had to release is just that knowing that I don't always get to know what the next step is going to be, but when
Yeah.
it's the right time to know, I will know. So there's a really big part in this that I have learned that comes down to like deeply trusting myself.
Mhm.
And and maybe that's something we'll get into later in this conversation, but I just wanted to mention that to you.
Yeah, and that is actually a direction we can go here is I know for all of the clients I work with, whether they're teenagers or adults, a lot of the challenge comes from the lack of self-trust and the looking outward to find direction and for reassurance that you're okay or that you are successful and looking for that external validation. And so, as we talk about confidence and self trust in this, it applies to all ages, really,
Yeah.
teenagers and adults. So, and also, you and I discussed this before we started recording, but when the adult in the life, when the parent or caregiver in the teenager's life is able to lean into their self-trust and develop confidence and like that internal knowing, it rubs off on the teenager. So if there is an adult listening right now who's like, gosh, I really want to help my teenager, that is the number one thing that I always say to do, is to work on yourself first.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and it's taken me a long time, it's still something that I'm working on, but it's something that I definitely trust more and more each and every day as I practice. It is knowing that you do have all of the answers inside of you. Sometimes it's just needing somebody to hold space, or for you yourself to create that space to be able to actually hear. I
Mhm.
once heard when I was meditating that all of the answers will come when you make space to hear them. And so
Yeah.
I do feel that it's the same way for our teens, and not that they need to have all of the answers right now. That's not it. It's just
Mhm.
being able to explore all of the possibilities that come up for them rather than staying in that place of lack and fear and self-doubt. As you said, one of the things that comes up so often with my clients is that they just don't feel like they're enough. And I know that there are still days that that comes up for me, right? It's a
Mhm.
constant muscle that we need to work at, confidence and deep self-trust and all the things.
Yeah.
So that's why I just love having these conversations. I feel like they're so meaningful because when I have conversations with people that I know feel aligned, it's just being able to share vulnerably that, I've been there too. I've had those
Mhm.
same thoughts. I've had similar experiences, and being able to guide one another along the journey, I feel like is the most beautiful part of the process.
Yeah, and part of that self-trust, you mentioned meditation. It's been a
Hmm.
big part of my life for a very long time, and I can pretty much attribute my mental well-being at this point, and also all of the direction I've taken in my life, having the courage to leave that career and to move. I moved 1,000 miles from my home that I'd lived in for 35 years to a brand new state with my family, and to have the courage to do those things because I knew all along that I was following my internal guidance. And it's impossible to know your internal guidance if you don't spend some time with yourself.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And that is something that I have come to realize over the last 4 years for sure. I don't even think I knew back in 2020 that that's what was happening,
Mhm.
right? Like I spoke of those little whispers. I remember after I had my son, it was a morning where I was just feeling like I needed to do something. I knew that the change needed to start with me, but change can feel almost impossible when you're trying to figure out how to just go from one extreme to the next. So I feel like it's really about just taking small steps.
Mhm.
Almost like I was creating like this ladder of believability, and I could only take small steps at a time in order to get, well, to where I am
Yeah.
today. And I know there's still going to be steps to follow after this, right? But yeah, it really came back to just creating that time and space for myself. And it didn't need to look like much. It was almost just like changing habits that were no longer serving me and replacing
Mhm.
them with ones that were, and then just like stacking on top of that.
Yeah.
And the more I would show up for myself, the more I would keep promises to myself. Like
Yes.
that's where the confidence started to be built. It
Right.
was really just in connecting more with myself, listening to myself, and telling myself on a daily basis, like there are small wins here that you can celebrate.
Yeah.
There's always something that you are doing on a daily basis that you are capable of being proud of.
And that's what it's all about. It's not the giant leaps, because that's not what's really actually going to happen. There are big moves that can happen in your life, like leaving the job and moving 1,000 miles, but it really is to get from point A to point B. There are steps that need to be taken between, and it's you making the decision to make those steps. And instead of feeling so overwhelmed of like, I want to be there and yet it's so far away, to be able to have the internal trust and that what's my next right step, and trusting that you will follow through with that, and just putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. And that's where I find practices like meditation or just going for a walk. I mean, there's a
Mhm.
million different ways to do this, but as long as you are just creating the space for yourself without any of the external noise, it allows you to come back home to that place and really like for me today, I just had to do this. I was really caught, like, just like I call it like above the neck, from like the neck up.
Mhm.
I was just really up in my head, and I I feel like I visualize it like it's like a spiral when I get up there and I start
Mhm.
um, overthinking, overanalyzing, worrying about certain things. So all I need to do, I know in that moment, is just come back to my breath, connect back with my body. And a
Yeah.
lot of the times that just looks like, a walk in nature or just
Mhm.
being out in nature or just taking a pause for 5 minutes just to breathe. There's tons of breathing exercises. I mean, you can go on the internet these days and find just about anything to help you. Like
Yeah.
there are tools and resources out there. I think it comes back to, and I know for me personally, it was just like, I don't know where to start. And so
Yes.
you get caught in that worry cycle and then you just don't take any action. You don't make a move.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just the simplest thing, like the smallest thing that we are truly craving, like that our soul is really
Mhm.
desiring. It just wants something so simple. And that really starts with just listening to what that is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a pattern interrupt. And this comes up a lot.
Ooh, I
I'm
like
sure
that.
you see that, right? Write that one
Yeah.
down, a pattern interrupt. It's when, and this comes up a lot, and probably when you're talking with the teenagers too. There's so much pressure to know what you want to do with the rest of your life, to make this decision. Should I go to college? If so, what do I study? If I don't go to college, what do I want to do for work? And I'm in the thick of it right now because my youngest is getting ready to go off to college. And so all of their friends are still talking about like they know they want to go to college, they don't know what they want to study. And so just like what you said, they get stuck above the head, right? Above the neck,
Hmm.
I think is what you said. And they're in the spiral, like the worry, doubt, fear spiral. And so when the pattern interrupt comes in, you notice, hey, gosh, I am all up in my head. I am all up in that stress right now. I need to step away and break that and shift gears and to
Yeah.
find things that help you do that. And they don't have to be a week-long retreat in the woods, right? It can literally be 5 minutes just walking around outside and looking at the trees or sitting, like you said, sitting and breathing in stillness. It's like trusting your intuition as what is my body needing right now? Do I need movement? Do I need stillness? Do I need to dance? Do I need to listen to music? Do I need inspiration? And then doing the thing that you know will help lift your vibration so that you can start making decisions out of confidence and self-trust versus fear and doubt and uncertainty.
Yeah. And from personal experience to anybody who's listening, I mean, like I said, I checked all the boxes. I did everything
Mhm.
that, was everything that was kind of like laid out for me. I literally feel like my life truly was just like, hey, you're just going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Like
Yeah.
my parents really truly did make it comfortable. And it
Mhm.
was their intention for me to live my absolute best life. And I know that. They didn't know any better, and neither did I back then. But I wound up in a career that I loved, but like you said, there was still something missing. So there's
Mhm.
always opportunity. Like, even though I made that decision to become a teacher, I never feel like, oh my God, that was the wrong decision. It
Yeah.
wasn't. It just no longer fit. I outgrew that. And so there's
Mhm.
always the possibility to create change too. Like, you don't have to stay stuck somewhere. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that my teen self would have really needed to hear.
And as a mom, you're living in inspiration and you're being a great model for your child. And that is really the best that we can do as parents is to
Hmm.
live in inspiration, do the things that light us up, the things that fuel us and help us feel purposeful in our lives. I was actually talking with my daughter about this last night. She has an idea of what she wants to study and an idea of how she wants to move in the world. She doesn't want to be in a 9 to 5 job. She doesn't want her life to be work. And then when she's older, be like, well, gosh, I just spent all of those years just working, which I'm so proud of that she's aware of that at this point. And I said, work doesn't have to be 9 to 5. It doesn't have to be that you sit down at an office and feel like crap. Like if that is not aligned for you, some people want that structure, they like that routine, but it's you figuring out what you need. And you and I were both at a point like we liked teaching. It wasn't a bad choice, but we realized that there was something else calling us. And that's what we're wanting to instill in our kids. Follow your intuition, follow your gut, do what lights you up, and then it won't feel like it's work, right? And that's hopefully what this next generation is realizing is possible for them.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to, and this is what I especially learned from my coach and what I love to teach my clients now, is that it really, at the end of the day, it all comes back to a feeling. No matter what it is
Yeah.
externally that you think you want and desire, once you get that, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Because it always comes back to how do you want to feel?
Hmm.
So, what I love to do now for myself personally, and then I teach this to my clients as well, is just how to reverse engineer. I'm
Yeah.
sure that you understand this concept because you were a teacher. When we used to create like our
Hmm.
lesson plans, it was always like with the end in mind. So, like,
Yeah.
what is the goal? What's the expectation that we have for our students, and how do we get them there? So, I
Hmm.
see this the same way. It's just energetically, if we are energetic beings and we're always after a feeling, it's how do you want to feel? So, what I'll have my students or my clients, I call them students still,
Yeah.
I have my clients do is write their, like, well, it's either a wouldn't it be nice list or a wouldn't it be cool list. And sometimes, like for me personally, the things that will come up on that list are just, as simple as like, I need a glass of water. Like my
Hmm.
body is literally just like, you have not had enough water today. Like that's where you need to start. Like that's the
And,
baseline. And then there's, all the way up to I ran a full marathon this year, which is something
mhm.
I would have never thought would have been possible for me. I
Right.
started running 4 years ago. That's one of the whispers I heard after I had
Okay.
my son. That was one of the first steps I took. It was just to run. And I know now that I started running because the feeling that I was craving was freedom. I felt so
Mhm.
trapped. I didn't know what to do with all these parts and pieces. I didn't know how to put myself back together. And I just felt like I just want to be free from all of this. And I also think that my mind and body just needed that space and time to be able to
Mhm.
process what was actually happening. And running was such a beautiful way for me to connect back with myself. And then again, 4 years later, just from taking consistent action and running, say for
Mhm.
10 to 20 minutes every single day, I was able to run a full marathon and complete that big goal. So that would be a
Yeah.
bigger goal, right? A bigger challenge that I put on my plate. And that just propels you. That just
Yeah.
propels you. And it just helps to really, really build and instill that confidence. But just again, taking time, setting time aside, you don't even have to write. You can type it into your phone. Like, wouldn't it be
Mhm.
nice? What do you want for yourself? What are those soul desires? And then once you have them on paper, you kind of come back to, okay, what is the feeling behind
Mhm.
this? And then you just start focusing on that. And the more you lean into how you want to feel, the more alive you're going to feel, and the more you'll be able to connect with that guidance system, as you said.
I'm so glad you brought that up because when you are clear about how you want to feel and you're able to tap into that feeling as much as possible now, the point is, if you are like for freedom, for example, I want to feel free. And in your life, when you are cultivating all of those feelings that you want to cultivate, that's where, a lot of the times one of the challenges that everybody struggles with is what will everyone think? What's this? What are my friends and family going to think if I choose this path? What is society going to think if I decide to do this? They're going to think I'm weird. They're going to think I'm a loser. They're going to think that I'm, all of these things, what they're going to think. But if you are feeling the way that you want to feel, it's not going to matter what they
Yeah,
think,
I
right?
love
And
this.
that's what it's all about.
It's so true. And I'm gonna speak to this really quickly just because I'm currently reading her book. You've heard of Kathy Heller, and she
I
has a book
don't
called
think I.
Abundant Ever After.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay, so at the beginning of the book, she talks about our guidance system, right? Almost being like a radio. So if you can think about it like a radio and like tuning to different types of music. So when we're stuck in fear and lack and scarcity mindset, that's when we literally just create static for ourselves. So we'll notice like we just whatever we're creating, the beliefs that we have, like that's what we're going to see around us. So if you really want to start connecting with more love, more gratitude, more freedom, more creativity, more bravery, more whatever the case may be for you, more connected relationships in your life, it's really just about starting like all of that starts from within. Like you need to set your own dial to that before you can start to
Mhm.
perceive that and create more of that in your external reality.
Yeah.
So really just again, when I say in tune, I really mean it. Like think about
Mhm.
yourself as a radio and just tuning yourself to whatever frequency and
Yeah.
station that you want to be able to hear. And it all comes back to just how do you want to feel? You
Right.
want to?
And I know personally speaking for me, how I used this in making those big transitions in my life when I was at that low point where I felt stuck and I felt alone and lost and I didn't know what my next step was. It did take for me getting clear on, well, what do I want? And then, like you said, tapping into the fear of it and really intentionally spending time in that visualization and in that feeling. So, waking up each morning and sitting there and visualizing what I wanted, but not just on the outside, like a certain house or a car or these, materialistic things, how I would feel when I had them. And I would sit and
Mm,
feel that as much as possible for a specific amount of time. It was just a short amount of time each day. And that was, I believe, for me, the catalyst that helped me align my energy, like you said, the frequency to what I wanted to draw toward me. Because what you want wants you back. And the more
yes.
you put out there, I want this, I don't want this, I want this, the more the universe is going to bring it back in turn. And so, really aligning yourself, like you said, with that frequency is so important to do and to bring it back with this confidence. So, it's like there's two ways of being that you can get in. And if you find that you're in that fear, doubt, uncertainty, and like thinking other people are judging me, to recognize it and then redirect, right? Redirect to where you
Yeah.
want to go and continue
Yeah.
to do that over and over.
And over again. And that's just
Uh-huh.
it. That's the muscle that needs to be built. And a really important part of that process that I have to make sure that I don't overlook is creating space, not getting stuck in it, but just creating space for some of that. I don't know why the word darkness is coming up right now,
Mhm.
but that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
It feels like being in the dark and I'm trying to find my way back to the light. I'm like, oh my gosh, where's the light switch? I'm stuck in the spiral again. How do I move through this? And a lot
Mhm.
of the times I feel like I need to remind myself that everybody, all humans, excuse me, just want to feel more seen, heard, and understood. So I know those parts of me are just trying to get my attention because they are, as you said, just trying to redirect me. How can I harness the
Mhm.
energy of fear and almost like transmute it or dissolve it so that it can dissolve or move me, propel me into the energy of love. But it really looks like, again, sitting with myself and actually hearing it and
Mhm.
just allowing it the space to just come up and out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that can be, well, not a lot of times, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to be in that place. And I feel like for most of us, that's where we tend to avoid. That's when
Mhm.
we'll pick up the phone and scroll. That's when we'll
Mhm.
go do the things that we just feel comfortable doing. But if we could just allow that to pass and
Yeah.
hear it and then decide what we want to do, how we want to shift in that moment, that's where a lot of the magic happens. It's all about
Yeah.
like that emotionally uncomfortable, like messy middle. Because in those spaces, that's where we're able to release what's no longer serving us, some of
Mhm.
those beliefs, as we said. And I call them limiting beliefs because they really
Mhm.
do limit us and our potential. And once we release those beliefs, that's where we create the space for the new ones that we actually want to integrate. And that's not to say that they're gone forever. It's just
Mhm.
over time, the more you practice, what I find is that almost like the same thing as a dial on a radio, you're turning down the noise on those thoughts, on
Mhm.
those beliefs, so that you can hear the ones that are actually true to you and that are true to your
Yeah.
heart. Can you imagine, Jennifer? Honestly, like I think about this so often because as a teenager, especially, and well into I'm almost 37. I'll be 37 in a few weeks, actually. But I know for most of my life, I've been so tuned to lack and fear and
Uh-huh.
criticism and judgment and I hear it around me too. I hear it within other people and now I have so much more compassion and I'm constantly trying to show up and focus on just giving kindness to people because I know what's going on in their minds and I know that there's such a
Mhm.
disconnect from that in their heart. And I just imagine a world where like imagine if we were so obsessed with just being like in love all the time
Yeah.
and gratitude all the
Yeah.
time. Like it's possible, but it
Yeah.
takes work to get there because we've
Yeah.
spent so long on the other side and we're still searching for that light.
Yeah. And that brings me to a really important point here. What you were talking about is that what we're talking about here isn't ignoring or
Mm.
bypassing the hard feelings and the hard times. Instead, embracing it and allowing it to flow through, because that is when you're able to shift then to what you are wanting. And I know you and I are speaking on the same page here, and that we've been through the stuff. Everybody's gone through hard stuff, right? And what we're talking about isn't spiritual bypassing. Like everything's perfect and rainbowy and the world is fantastic. And I'm just going to align myself and visualize and everything will come my way, if only. But no, it's like you're going to go through the shadows. You're going to go through the darkness, the heaviness, the grief. There's that duality that is being a human. And it's
Mhm.
important to experience and allow for both without
Yeah.
judgment. And our ability to overcome that fear of judgment of others and of self is really the gateway to helping us find our alignment and our most authentic self.
Oh, that was beautiful. I feel super called to ask you just because you shared that, how your daughter is doing now.
Yeah. She's
And
actually
how, like,
doing,
if you've seen,
yeah.
sorry, just if you've seen her move some of what we just talked about too. Like, I'm
Yes.
so
Okay.
curious.
So I'm so glad you asked that. It's a perfect time to discuss that too. Is that in all that I've learned and it's been inspired by experiencing what I experienced with my daughter, right?
Yeah, me too.
And she's my greatest teacher. Both of my girls are my greatest teachers. And I say that on my podcast all of the time because I've allowed them to be. And what
Mm.
I learned and I'll get to how she's doing now, but what I learned in witnessing the deepest depths of challenge and struggle with her is that the more I pushed to fix or to change or to, act, the more I suffered. And it didn't impact her. And what I found was the moment I released and I said, I'm going to go with this flow. I don't want to be in this flow, but I'm going to release the need to control. It helped me help her.
Mm.
And so right now, she is doing so much better. She's more independent. She's got the therapies that she's needing. She's going to college. She's at a place right now where 9 years ago, or I'll say 6 years ago, I wasn't sure if we were going to get here. And so it's really fantastic to see. And I have to actually say this now, and it's a story I've never told on my podcast, probably because I'm afraid of judgment. But I'm letting that go. I'm letting that
Yeah,
go this year.
you're in good company. I love
Yeah.
meaningful conversations.
Right. So it was I went to a psychic medium, a spiritual medium, and this was when my daughter was really in the depth of her depression and I was feeling so lost. And it was before we moved and it was before I decided to become a coach. It was all of that. And I was with her and I didn't tell her what was going on with my daughter. I just wanted to hear what messages were going to come through. And she sat for a minute and it's like she got a tear in her eye and she said, she acknowledged, you're going through something really hard right now. And she said, but this is what you asked for. And when I heard that, I was like, part of me was like, what do you mean? I would never ask for this. But after having a conversation with her, like I'm getting chills while I tell this story,
I
but
just got full body chills. That's,
uh-huh.
I was just
Yeah.
about to say that, and you said it first.
Right. So after saying that, she explained to me that this was after I realized I wanted more for myself and I wasn't sure what it was. She's like, this experience you're having is taking you to where you're wanting to be, where you are like your visualizing. This hard experience is part of that. And so ever since I heard that, I'm like, I know that this is hard, but I also know that it's necessary for her on her journey and for me on mine. And I let go of the need to control or try to judge it or be afraid. And I just embraced it and said, here we are. Let's link arms and let's walk together and know that we'll be better people ultimately as a result. So.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that. And There was something in there that I was also needing to hear today that no matter, I don't exactly know what it was you said just then, but it's something about the challenge and like it's meant to be. It's meant to
Yeah.
be what it's meant to be, and it is in fact guiding you
Yes.
towards where you're meant to go. It's so
Yeah.
interesting that we bring this up today. This may be the first time that I've ever spoke about this also on a podcast because it is new, but psychic mediumship is not ever something that I could have envisioned for myself in this business and everything
Mhm.
that has happened over the last few years. But I can totally see now why I felt so disconnected. There were so many gifts inside of me that weren't able to be seen, heard, and understood.
Mhm.
And even just like back at the end of 2024, when all of this really came to surface,
Yeah.
I was terrified, terrified to speak
Mhm.
about it, terrified to tell anybody about it because I felt like, what are people going to think?
Mhm.
What are they going to think about me? And it always comes back to, maybe it's a things you hear in movies or in on the
Yeah.
TV, like whatever it is in conversations, right? It's all of this woo woo stuff, but really I've come to this really deep place of knowing that it's not that at all. This is actually in fact why we are created, why we are
Mhm.
here. We are souls having a human experience. We are energy and we are all more connected than we think. I once visualized how like all people are actually connected by like this invisible thread, call it like a golden thread if you want to, but it's just love that connects all of us and all of us are connected to the same source, which is, you can call it source, you can call it love, God, whatever it is for you, right? But yeah, we're all just essentially walking each other back home to that same love. We came from love, and that's what we're going back home to. And in the messy middle, it's just the journey. It's the human
Yeah.
experience. And there needs to be those challenges, like you said, in order to get where we are going. And it's just that was a really important reminder for me today. I feel like I needed it too because I can often see that, we kind of tend to like go back asleep and we tend to forget where we came from. And so that's why these conversations and even people like yourself who create podcasts to talk about these types of things, it's so important because we all need the reminders. I myself, as I said, have a coach because I need the reminders
Mhm.
on a daily basis. But the beauty in that is then I get to give back to others like you.
Yeah.
Your reminder is your daughters and watching them on their own journey, and then you get to show up for other people, other parents and teens, and help them with that. And I just think that's so
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yeah, and it's really admirable that you are trusting your intuition and leaning into your gifts, even though there is a fear of judgment. And
Yeah,
that sets a really great example for all of your clients and everybody who listens to your podcast. And I'm so excited to cheer you along.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
I'm excited too. This feels like a new friendship, and
Yes.
this is what's so cool about these conversations too, is you never know. Like people will ask me, like, or they'll say to me, like, I'm so inspired by you. Like, I would love to start a podcast. And I'm like, do
Mhm.
it. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, like, give me some reasons why. Like, what are the benefits? And I'm like, I could list thousands at this point. Like, not to mention just the having like that space to be able to share your voice
Mhm.
and what you truly value and what you believe in, but it's also the connections that you're able to create, the friendships that you make. And really truly a big part of podcasting to me has been so healing just because I'm putting myself in spaces and places with people who
Mhm.
understand
Yeah.
and who are speaking that same language. So that in itself is incredibly empowering. So if you're here listening to this today, that's already the right I was going to say the right step, but
Yeah.
it's one step in the right direction for you, and I know that.
And I always feel like anything that comes across your path, if you're hearing it, if you're watching it, whatever it is that you are ingesting, it's like you were meant to hear this for whatever reason. And I'm so glad that you and I were able to have this conversation. And I feel like our conversation and this connection is a really great example of energy attracting like energy. And
Mhm.
when you put that out there, when you put out who you are and you're authentic, you're going to attract people like that into your life. And then you just co-regulate, right? You're giving and receiving that positivity and that love and support. And with that golden thread that you mentioned, it's a great way to visualize how we are, in fact, all connected. And this podcast is a great example of how we can maintain those connections and put that out into the world and help lift each other up. And I'm so glad you came on here to share your story, share your insights, and really inspire me to talk about things that I've never talked about, even in 150 plus episodes.
I know. I love it. That's why we feel so deeply too, right? Like even in terms of like sharing, I spoke of and you spoke of like just feeling like those goosebumps and those
Yeah.
vibrations and the energy. Again, it's the connection. So for parents who are listening for sure, like just know that you feel the way you feel and you feel so deeply because of that deep, deep connection that you have
Mhm.
with them. And so
Yeah.
just know and trust that that connection will lead you to all the spaces and places that you need to be in order to help yourself thrive, and them as well.
Yeah. And my word of wisdom just comes from my personal experiences to just let go. Let go
Yeah,
of the need to control, let go of the expectations, and just lean into self-trust and belief in your teenager. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate coming on your show. I appreciate you coming on mine. This has been such a fun conversation, and I know you and I will continue to stay in touch and support one another along the way.
Yeah, 100%. I would love, before we part ways, just if you could share where my audience can find you,
Yeah, of
links,
course. We'll
anything that
do.
you
That's
have.
kind of
So,
important too. Yeah. So my podcast is called Raising Happy Teens. You can find me at Jennifer Delaquadri or Jennifer.Delaquadri on Instagram. I also have that same handle on YouTube, and I have a Facebook group called Raising Happy Teens. You can also find me at my website. All my resources, just jenniferdelaquadri.com. And I'd love to
awesome.
hear you share where people can find you, Kristi.
Yeah, probably the most active on my podcast, Confident Teen. You can find that anywhere you listen to your podcast. I'm most active on Instagram, so that's Confident Teen Teacher. And then my website as well, Kristi Simons, Simons, coaching. And that's
Okay.
it.
Well, it's good chatting with you. And yeah, this has been a great episode. I appreciate it.
Loved it. Thank you so much.
If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.